Welcome back. As you know, you live in a diverse society, a society where people from very different backgrounds live together and work together. In a school in an urban area, you'll find children who go to churches, mosques, synagogues and temples. In workplaces, you'll find different toilets. If you go to any public park in a city, you will see families with members who can look very different to each other and yet are raising children and living together. This is because we also live in what's sometimes described as a pluralistic society. But when you have a situation like the conflict in Gaza, the conflict between Israel and Hamas, suddenly some of the differences between us come to the fore. Look, for example, at what happened in Sea Point over the weekend. Some people were accused of disrupting a prayer meeting in support of Israel, or some of the very difficult debates people are having in our society right now. Calina Ellwand is from the Global Center for Pluralism. She joins us now. Calina, good afternoon to you. And I suppose, in a way, we may forget how new a pluralistic society is. I suppose, really, we're only looking at the last 50, maybe 70 years of human societies in most places that you'll find any kind of pluralism. Is it a relatively new phenomenon?
In fact, the world is a very diverse place and has been a very diverse place for centuries, and human beings have found ways to live amongst one another with that diversity for many era. So I would not say it's a new phenomenon. However, I think what's evolving are different strategies, new strategies and techniques for how to go about living amongst diversity in a way that does not see that diversity as a threat, but rather sees that diversity as an asset, as something that makes societies stronger. That's what at the Global Center for Pluralism we define as pluralism. That's how we understand it. It's a positive response to diversity. And I think that we do need to learn from other societies, from other organizations, from individuals who are managing to do this well, because of course it is a challenge that societies around the world do grapple with, how to respect diversity and treat it as a positive.
It's so interesting because, I mean, for example, in the United States, in a society which has many resonances with our society, certainly along race, you see huge divisions around whether people are Jewish or Muslim or Christian. In Zanzibar, you've had churches and synagogues next to each other for hundreds of years.
Yes, exactly. So, there are definitely examples, positive examples in the world that need to be brought to light. And that's actually one of the goals, the particular objectives of our Global Pluralism Award, which is to showcase some examples of whether it's communities, organizations, or individuals who have found a way to do this, who have found a way to create safe spaces, create respectful dialogue across those differences, which are sometimes considered extremely radical divides or extreme divides. And so we bring these every 2 years. The Global Pluralism Award highlights these initiatives and tries to bring global visibility to these initiatives in order to demonstrate that there are positive examples out there. There are some really inspiring examples out there, and it can be done, and to hopefully help others realize that they can also make this change in their own society. It's not as hard as we might be led to believe.
Why does an issue in the Middle East have such an impact? So in South Africa, we're very far from what's happening in Gaza and in Israel. And yet, it's really putting our society under stress. Why does that happen? Is there a conversation here about the different elements of our identities?
I mean, we human beings naturally gravitate towards communities where they feel they belong. And I think that can be it can be very challenging to create belonging across some of these divides of diversity, whether that's religion, whether that's language, whether that's even history. So it certainly is a challenge, but it can be done. There are many examples of it being done around the world, and I think what's needed right now in the world is to lean into the opportunity, the possibility of pluralism, of building pluralism.
One of the things about a pluralistic society is it creates people who have, the way I understand it, different elements of our identity. So someone in South Africa can be a Muslim, a woman, a South African, a supporter of our national rugby team, which is generally played by men. They can be a teacher. All of these things all at the same time. And most of the time, they probably feel most of the time more South African. Maybe their identity as being a teacher is often the most important thing. When we have a situation like we have in the Middle East, does the element of being perhaps a Muslim, for other South Africans it may be perhaps being Jewish, those elements become more important, and they feel those elements more strongly? Is that what happens? Is that why suddenly we have the arguments that we're having?
Yeah, I think it's really important that you raise that identity is multifaceted, and all of us, every single one of us, have many different identities that are all sort of working in tandem in our life, and definitely at times certain identities are more significant to us than others. But I should mention one of the winners of the Global Pluralism this year is actually a Palestinian organization that has been working for over 2 decades. They're called Reform. They've been working for over 2 decades in Palestine on bridging some of the divides even within Palestinian society, whether that's divides of gender, of religion, where those communities live, and how much interaction they actually get to have with one another, because it is a very segmented society and quite siloed. So there's examples even within some of these societies that we consider maybe perhaps divided. There are examples of organizations, really incredible organizations like Reform, being able to find ways to bridge divides of identity and changing even the way within that society that identity is viewed. There's common ground. They're finding common ground. They're finding values that people with very different identities can actually can come to an agreement around. So I think it's finding those common elements, that common shared sense of humanity, that some shared ethic that we all can gravitate to, and we realize we're not as different as individuals as we may have thought, or as other forces in the world, such as the media, so online media, perhaps the news media is leading us to believe. So we're all. I think that's sort of a similarity in a way of all of us. We all have multiple identities that are all swirling around in us at any one time, and that is perhaps what is more common than not.
Calina, what I always find is there's certain things that everybody wants, and everybody wants a better life for their children. And a really easy way to unite people is to have a bad school. Because what that means is that everybody in that community unites to try and make that school better. There are all sorts of examples. It can be hospitals, it can be streets. I mean, that's where you start to see people really working together, and the differences between them become less important.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. When there's a common goal that a community can work towards, then you see that on an individual basis, we're not as different as we may have been led to believe. We all share a certain vision of the future, a hope for peace, a hope for more stability and prosperity in our societies. These are all, some of the common goals that we share as humans. So I think those are very important to emphasize, and something we do try to emphasize when we talk about pluralism. Pluralism doesn't always translate as well in all parts of the world. So we've been talking quite a bit this week because we have all the award laureates from 10 different countries together here in Ottawa in Canada with us. And so we've been talking to them and sort of saying, what is the language that will work in South Africa? What is the language that will work in Palestine? What is the language that will work around this in Brazil? So that we can find some common values to be using, some common language to be using.
Calina Ellwand, we'll leave it there from the Global Centre for Pluralism. Thank you.